Stephen A. Smith, Dan Orlovsky, and the rest of First Take. We are talking Dan Orlovsky let Stephen A. have it for his Joe Burrow take. Interesting headline. Let's see exactly what Stephen A. Smith's take is.
Stephen A., who has the better chance at winning MVP this year? Do you feel like it's Burrow or Lamar?
I think it's going to be Lamar Jackson. That to me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if we're talking MVP, who has the better chance of winning MVP? I'm always going to go with the guy who can do more, can run, can throw. I'm not saying Lamar's better than Joe Burrow, but if it's who's got the better chance of being the MVP, probably is Lamar. Because if Lamar is really good and you've got, 3,500 passing yards, 1,200 rushing yards, the 40-something total touchdowns, and the Ravens are good, that's hard to beat. Joe Burrow is going to give you one thing. Joe Burrow is going to give you passing yards and passing touchdowns. So if all things are equal, and if you told me Lamar has an A+ season and Joe Burrow has an A+ season, it's going to be difficult for Joe Burrow to statistically have a better season than Lamar. So, I mean, if I had to pick one of the two to win MVP, I'm going to take the guy who can do more as far as fill different categories. Again, that's not saying that Lamar is better than Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow is better, but that's not really how predicting MVP works.
You remember his first full season as a starter, he only became the second unanimous league MVP in history. I think the first one, if I remember correctly, just looking at my notes, I think it was once upon a time was Tom Brady. We know what Lamar Jackson brings to the table in terms of his electrifying talent. And remember, the MVP is a regular season award. And so when we look at it from that perspective, as great as I know Joe Burrow to be, and I think he is an absolute stud, there are so many other components that come into the equation that contributes to the success.
Yeah, MVP is a vote. I mean, again, this is a voter's award. So you have to also factor in how people vote. People are going to vote when they see electrifying plays, highlight tapes, all that other stuff. Is that how it should be? I don't know. A different conversation for a different day. MVP is a weird award because I think people assume it's the best player award. That's not always how it is. And that's for every sport. That's for the NBA. It's for the NFL. If the NBA, if the MVP was the best player, LeBron would have 9 or 10 of them, but he doesn't. That's not how voters vote. There's bias involved. There's marketability involved. There's highlight reel involved. There's where the voters live involved. It's hard for a West Coast person to win MVP awards because East Coast voters don't watch them. Not that either of these guys are West Coast, but it happens. Happens all the time. So I don't think Stephen A. is too far off here.
Success of the Cincinnati Bengals. Their defense is vastly improved in recent memory. Zach Taylor has proven himself to be a quality coach. Obviously, mixing with the football, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Boyd and what they can do obviously has a lot to do with Burrow throwing them the football. But then, nevertheless, you don't look at Cincinnati Bengals and look at them as asking of Joe Burrow what the Baltimore Ravens have religiously asked of Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson has carried this franchise, and we saw what has happened when he hasn't been able to carry this franchise. Huntley backing him up was a respectable 2-3 record in the 5 games that Lamar Jackson has missed, even though he fumbled in the playoffs, and that led to the Cincinnati Bengals returning at damn near 100 yards, and ultimately that was the key to victory in their playoff game. But when you look at Lamar Jackson, because of the mercurial talents that he has and his ability to run the football, now that you've acquired OBJ and you've drafted Zach.
Man, if y'all have been watching the channel, y'all know this is one of my pet peeves is whenever talking heads just get into a 40-second, 2-minute where they're just rattling off the roster. Stephen A. just did that. I'm going to rewind it just so we can enjoy it together. Watch when he does it with the Bengals first. He rattles off Lamar or Jamar, T. Higgins. He just starts rattling them off. And then he goes to the Ravens and starts rattling off Huntley and OBJ and all this other stuff. Let's just really enjoy that together.
Zach Taylor has proven himself to be a quality coach. Obviously, Mixon can run with the football. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Boyd and what they can do obviously has a lot to do with Burrow throwing them the football.
So we just had Taylor, Mixon, Boyd, Chase, Higgins.
Franchise. Huntley backing up was a respectable 2-3 record. And now that you've acquired OBJ and you've drafted Zay Flowers and these boys, when you look at what he's going to be asked, the eye of it, Dan and Kim, is going to be on him because of his contract, because of what he's being asked to do, and how that responsibility is going to elevate even more so now. Before, we just wanted him to do it whatever way.
I will say too, another marketability thing. Lamar Jackson betting on himself, getting the contract, all that stuff, that will play into voters' minds. That would be a positive. If he does all that and then has a great season, that will be an advantage for him.
He could. But now you're going to expect him to specifically throw the football. And if he throws the football effectively, not to say that he hasn't in the past, but now that you're looking for that based on the weapons that he's had, because you're looking for it, if he does it effectively, I think in the mind's eye, it's going to look at people, it's going to make people look at him and say, wow, he's elevated his game even more. With Joe Burrow, we already know he's there. So we're gonna take it for granted. You know how we talk about voters sometimes and how you're looking at some of these awards and we take for granted what their greatness is? I think with Joe Burrow throwing the football, that's how people are going to look at him. But I think when we see Lamar Jackson, we're going to say, wow, this is something we don't believe we've seen from him on that level before. And I think that's going to give him the edge in the mind's eye of voters, and that's going to position him to capture league MVP. It's going to position him better to do so than Burrow.
Yeah, Joe Burrow is my answer, and everyone knows how much I love Lamar. I've picked Lamar for a couple years to win MVP. But this brings up like a little bit of a bigger issue for me right now with what's going on. Like, I don't know what happened this offseason, but Joe Burrow, for some reason, and even Josh Allen are being like overlooked and doubted, and shades getting thrown their way. Joe Burrow accounted for over 40 touchdowns.
See, I don't think they are. I mean, Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen had kind of a down year, so I think people are kind of down on the Bills and on Josh Allen. But Joe Burrow, I think, is kind of what Stephen A. said. He's just kind of assumed as a great player. People just assume Joe Burrow is going to be great. He is great. But it takes a lot for a Joe Burrow or a Patrick Mahomes or whoever to win MVP because they are assumed to be great. And that it makes it harder. Same with LeBron. Like, those players, it's harder for them to win MVP. It just is. I mean, you have, like, Joe Burrow is going to have 5,000 yards passing. He's going to have 40 passing touchdowns, single-digit interceptions to win.
Almost 5,000 yards last year. And now we're sitting here going, as much as I love Lamar, we're going, is Lamar in a better chance to go win the MVP than Joe Burrow?
Oh, please.
Who's got no. Who's got the best offensive line he's ever had this year? Finally, Joe Burrow's become, at worst, the second best quarterback in the NFL with one of the worst offensive lines.
You're
now he's got
making
the best.
up a narrative.
And no.
Nobody has said no. What headline have you seen somebody throwing shade at Joe Burrow? Who are these people?
Did you see the top 100
I need
player
to find
ranking?
them. Where have they? Who's throwing shade at Joe Burrow?
First of all, you just said that you think Lamar is a better chance to win MVP, which is
that's not throwing shade at Joe Burrow.
Man, this is brutal. I don't know, man. I don't know if we're going to be able to watch all this video. I mean, down here in the captions or whatever, like when the chapters of the video, this is entitled "Cue the Yelling Match." I mean, look, I don't think that what Stephen A. said is crazy at all. I think Lamar probably is set up better to win an award like MVP. I can say that while simultaneously saying I think Joe Burrow is the better quarterback. But that's not the conversation. Like, the conversation is who would voters more likely vote for? As Lamar. I don't understand. Like, I don't understand Dan's point here. That is a hell of a collar on Dan's shirt. That thing is thick.
Oh, which has become a quarterback award than Joe Burrow. Did you see the top 100 quarterback? Did you see the top 100 player ranking? Did you see it?
Yes.
Did you see it?
Yes.
Joe Burrow's not even the second best quarterback on there.
Pray.
Wait, we doing this.
Yeah, that way.
Joe Burrow's not the second best quarterback on there. So how is that not? How is that? That's not me creating a narrative or making it up. Is it fact or fiction? Is it true or false?
It's fact, but you're not contextualizing it properly, if I may say so. When you look at a guy like Jalen Hurts, he took this team to the Super Bowl. He lost in the Super Bowl as a runner-up to Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes beat Joe Burrow to get there.
I mean, I don't think it's insane after last year. If we're just taking last year and you say Jalen Hurts is the second best quarterback in the NFL, I don't think that's insane. I mean, he did almost win the MVP. He did almost win the Super Bowl. I think it's, will it prove to be where he's better than Joe Burrow? I'm not sure about that, but I certainly wouldn't say someone is insane for taking a guy who should have been the MVP, who could have and should have won the Super Bowl, and saying, yeah, this guy is a top 2 quarterback. If Joe Burrow is a 99 on the quarterback scale, and you told me Jalen Hurts is a 97 or a 98, like he's right there, or flip-flop it, that's right there. That's probably about right.
Could be a reason why people were looking at it from that standpoint. It ain't like somebody looked at Joe Burrow and has any questions about his greatness. If anything, Dan Orlovsky, they're taking it for granted. That would be a more accurate
Which is
whatever
you want to phrase it as.
They're taking it for granted. They're not disrespecting him. They're assuming he's going to be there, that he is elite, and you're almost it's just like you said about Patrick Mahomes.
Taking him for granted, not disrespecting him?
No. You've said it before. Patrick Mahomes, we just take for granted what he's going to do instead of appreciating it. And we debated that because we were saying, excuse me, Dan, when you're taking something for granted, you're making the assumption that the level of greatness that you have witnessed is exactly what's going to reappear this upcoming season. That's not disrespecting somebody. That's simply assuming and taking for granted their greatness and saying, hey, you know what, we expect that from you. It's not that big of a deal.
I think
whereas if somebody else is great, it is a big deal.
Stephen,
I think Lamar gets disrespected a lot. He gets disrespected more because of people assume he's not a good passer, even though he's been a great passer his entire career. Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, whoever, they are taken for granted. I don't think taking someone for granted is inherently disrespecting them. These great players that are just great all the time, that we know are great, it is harder for them to win MVPs because the voters do have a fatigue with those players and teams. It happens. Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs, they are facing fatigue from voters.
I think taking someone for granted is disrespecting them.
In a way, I mean, it's not malicious disrespect.
Please, I don't take it for, I don't get, Molly takes me for granted every day. I don't feel disrespected because of it. She takes me for granted every day, okay? And I don't feel disrespected because of it. I accept it.
Marquise Hollywood Brown, Willie Snead, Seth Roberts, Miles Boykin, and Chris Moore. Those were the wide receivers the Ravens had when Lamar Jackson was the unanimous MVP. You know what that wide receiver room looks like now?
Yep.
OBJ, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar.
Well, I mean, he only threw 3,100 yards that year. He had 36 touchdowns or whatever, but Lamar is not going to win the MVP because he was what he does in the air. What Lamar is really good at, as far as like throwing, is he's really good at limiting interceptions. Really, really good at that. So if Lamar has 3,100 yards again, 36 to 40 touchdowns, 8-9 interceptions, and tacks on 1,000 yards rushing, yeah, he probably should be the MVP. That's a pretty insane stat line. That's a bananas level stat line. And that's why I think Lamar has a better shot at winning MVP, because he can do that. Even though total yards and all that stuff, Joe Burrow will have more, voters are going to see what I just laid out for Lamar, and they're going to say that's better or more deserved of MVP than 4,800 yards for Joe Burrow. Just how the award works.
And Devin Duvernay. That right there, not only has Lamar Jackson gotten the bag, he's gotten actual help. And Todd Monken, the new OC, there's an ownership. There's a collaboration within this offense where Lamar Jackson understands, yes, they're committed to me and I'm just as committed to them. I want ownership of what we're doing. My input is asked. Not only is it asked, it's expected. He is texting his OC saying, hey, I like this play. Let's do.
I mean, it is definitely the best offensive team that Lamar Jackson has had. The most weapons, all that stuff. And he is positioned because of that and because of his contract situation in the offseason. He is positioned to have a better narrative surrounding him for this award.
Do that. Todd Monken's like, all right.
You also got to factor in that Joe Burrow's coming into the season not 100%. I mean, how much, like, will his calf, will that play a factor into the first couple of weeks? I don't know. But that's another aspect of, like, if another reason why I would pick Lamar is that Now, granted, Lamar has been injured the last 2 years, so it's not to say that Lamar will go into it, play a full season, but something else you got to factor in with Burrow.
Let's go. Those are the things that make me say Lamar Jackson is in a position where he has the best roster he's had. That's why I think it's more likely that he would get MVP. It's not about disrespecting Joe Burrow. We all love Joe Burrow. Hey, Daniel?
I think Lamar's going to have a great year as well. Like, I totally agree with everything. I just think Joe Burrow has a better chance of winning MVP because we've seen Joe have 2 years that were absolutely spectacular. And in those 2 years, he's unquestionably become, at worst, the second best quarterback in the NFL.
Is there a delay on Dan's? I feel like I'm watching like an old Godzilla movie.
NFL. And he has a better offensive line. He did that with a poor offensive line. So if we're going to make the point that Lamar,
I feel like Mechagodzilla is about to show up. Mothra is about to show up.
Then we also have to be fair in talking about that Joe has the best offensive line that he's ever had. And there is an aspect of disrespect here.
This is a lot. I think the conversation boils down to this. If Lamar has a great season and Joe Burrow has a great season, if they both have an equally great season, who do you think voters are going to vote for? That is the question. Because the question is not who's going to have the better season. The question is not who's the better player. The question is who has a better chance at winning MVP. So pretend they both have a A+ season. In the comments below, let me know, who do you think the voters would vote for? I think the voters would vote for Lamar. I think Lamar has a narrative, a better narrative that fits for a voter. The way he plays is more dynamic and electrifying, which is better for voters. That's the real question here. I don't think that Dan is really answering the question. Dan is answering basically who he thinks is the better quarterback, which is, again, not the question. Not at all.
Because Joe Burrow, up until the AFC title game last year, he's the only guy that can knock off Patrick Mahomes. And he just about did it again, if not for that offensive line dealing with some injuries in that AFC title game. Credit Kansas City for winning the game.
None of the playoffs matter. It's a regular season award anyways. So, like if you told me who has a better chance of leading their team to the Super Bowl, Joe Burrow. Who's the better quarterback? Joe Burrow. Who do I think has a better shot at winning MVP? Lamar Jackson.
There's no question about it. But to sit here and say that he's the second best quarterback in football, but also I think that someone else has got better chances of winning MVP, and then we're also going to place him as the third best quarterback in football in some voting thing that I have no idea who voted for, and that's an issue of mine as well.
But that's his whole thing. Like he's talking about a voter award. So the NFL Top 100 or whatever should be a great example of how this works. Like, Dan's kind of answering his own questions. I just think the problem is that Dan doesn't understand the question. I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. But I think Lamar has a better chance of winning the MVP than Patrick Mahomes. Why? Because Patrick Mahomes won it last year. Voters very rarely like to give out back-to-back MVPs. You have to be even better. You have to be, you always hear voters come out and say, well, to win it back-to-back, you got to do something really special. You always hear that. Do I think Patrick Mahomes is better than Lamar? Obviously. Do I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL? Yes. But Lamar has a better chance at winning MVP because of those voter factors.
And Josh Allen's nowhere in that conversation either. That's where I'm sitting here saying we're losing sight of some stuff, and we're not valuing these quarterbacks in the proper way.
Well, there's a couple of things. Obviously, you're wrong. Nothing new there. That's number one. Number two, you just made your point. We don't know who's voting.
Yes.
So what level of credibility should we attach to them? That we don't know who the hell these people are that are making these assertions. So the hell with them. We can talk about it on our own, but the hell with them, okay? We don't know who they are. They didn't put themselves front and center, put their name on it and stuff like that. That's their damn problem. Number three, as an aside, I just want to mention this. When Kimberly, Kimberly sits there and calls you Daniel, I'm sort of looking at you, Orlovsky, and I'm imagining your hair cut instead of that Elvis high top. You understand? That Vanilla Ice high top. And when she says Daniel, I'm starting thinking about James Bond, Daniel Craig. That's what.
All right, and that's where we'll end the video. I think we're all on the same page there. So let me know in the comments below what you think. Who does have the better chance of winning MVP? Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson? I think I've laid out the situation well. I would hope. I don't see any comments saying, well, Joe Burrow's a better quarterback. What are y'all talking about? Agreed. Joe Burrow is the better quarterback. We're talking about who's got the better chance at winning MVP. The narrative, the voters. Put all that, think about all that. Open your third eye. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.